The first crack in Cassidy Brooks' meticulously planned life wasn't metaphorical. It was a jagged, hairline fissure snaking across the center of her brand-new, obscenely expensive Carrara marble bathroom floor tile. It appeared exactly 3 days after the final construction crew, led by the perpetually smirking Vince Torelli, had packed up their dusty tools and declared her dream home renovation complete. Cassidy stood frozen, towel clutched to her damp body, staring at the floor. It wasn't just a crack in tile. It was a fracture in the fragile facade of control she'd rebuilt after the divorce, a physical manifestation of the shoddy workmanship and broken promises that had plagued the entire project. $45,000 over budget, 6 months behind schedule. And now, this. The cool marble under her bare feet felt suddenly treacherous. The pristine white grout lines she'd agonized over seemed to mock her. She remembered Vince's parting words, delivered with a patronizing pat on the shoulder that made her skin crawl. "Relax, sweetheart. Looks perfect. Enjoy your palace." Sweetheart? She'd swallowed the bile then, too exhausted and financially drained to fight. But now, gazing at that crack, a cold, unfamiliar fury began to crystallize within her. It wasn't hot rage. It was glacial, precise, and utterly focused. Relax? Oh, Vince Torelli and his band of merry butchers would learn exactly how relaxed Cassidy Brooks could be. Cassidy wasn't naive. At 39, she'd navigated corporate mergers, a messy divorce that left her financially battered but wiser, and the daunting task of single-handedly managing the renovation of this charming, if neglected, 1920s bungalow, her hard-won sanctuary. She'd chosen Torelli Construction not on a whim, but based on glossy brochures, seemingly solid references, probably fabricated, she now realized, and Vince's initial overwhelming charm offensive. He'd promised top-tier craftsmanship, transparent pricing, and client satisfaction above all. Lies, all of them. The problem started subtly. The seasoned electrician, Dave, whose breath perpetually smelled of stale coffee and cigarettes, miswired the kitchen outlets, causing her new espresso machine to spectacularly short-circuit. The plumbing, handled by Vince's perpetually silent nephew, Leo, resulted in a leak behind the newly tiled shower wall that manifested as a spreading Rorschach blot on her living room ceiling. The custom cabinetry, promised to be solid maple, arrived looking suspiciously like particle board, with a thin maple veneer already peeling at the edges. Each time, Cassidy documented meticulously, dated emails with photos, voicemails saved, invoices carefully filed. Each time, Vince would arrive, oozing false concern. "Whoopsie, Dave must have had an off day. We'll fix her up, Cass, no sweat." He'd deploy a visibly hungover subcontractor for a hasty patchwork repair, often creating new problems. His dismissive attitude escalated with every complaint. "You women, always sweating the small stuff," he'd muttered once, thinking she was out of earshot. The final insult came with the punch list. Cassidy had itemized 47 outstanding defects. Vince showed up, glanced at it, laughed, and said, "You're dreaming, honey. Job's done. Final payments due." He'd threatened a lien if she withheld the last $15,000. Cornered and fearing legal battles she couldn't afford, she'd paid, and got the crack 3 days later. Cassidy sat at her reclaimed oak dining table, the surface cool beneath her palms. Spread before her wasn't dinner, but her arsenal. The bulging file folder labeled Torelli Nightmare, her laptop glowing, and a large, untouched glass of Pinot Grigio. Revenge was a dish best served cold, they said. Cassidy intended to serve it frozen, meticulously plated and utterly devastating. Not with violence, not with vandalism. Too crude, too risky. No, her revenge would be financial, reputational, and perfectly legal. It would mirror the slow, grinding frustration they'd inflicted upon her. It would be administrative. Phase 1, documentation overload. Cassidy became a one-woman regulatory hurricane. She filed formal complaints with meticulous evidence. The city building department, detailed reports with photos of code violations, improper electrical grounding, insufficient bathroom venting leading to potential mold. She'd discovered the mold behind the poorly patched shower leak. Structural concerns about a load-bearing wall they'd allegedly reinforced. State Contractor Licensing Board, accusations of gross negligence, breach of contract, misrepresentation of materials, the maple cabinets, and failure to rectify known defects. She included sworn affidavits from the independent inspector she'd finally hired post-completion, whose report read like a horror novel. Better Business Bureau, a scathing, evidence-backed review outlining every broken promise and botched job. Attorney General's Consumer Protection Division, a comprehensive complaint detailing deceptive business practices. She didn't just file, she followed up, relentlessly, polite but firm emails, certified letters, phone calls logged with dates, times, and names. She became a familiar, politely persistent voice in the ears of bored bureaucrats, slowly nudging them into action. Phase 2, the online crucible. Cassidy had always been a passive social media user, not anymore. She created anonymous but verifiable profiles on every relevant platform: Home Advisor, Angie's List, Yelp, Google Reviews, even niche contractor forums. Her reviews weren't rants, they were clinical dissections. She posted high-resolution photos of the cracked tile, the mold bloom, the peeling cabinet veneer, the amateurish electrical work. She quoted Vince's dismissive comments verbatim. She uploaded scanned copies of invoices juxtaposed with the independent inspector's damning assessments. She tagged Torelli Construction relentlessly. She didn't just post once, she updated. Every time a new issue surfaced, like the dining room floor that started squeaking alarmingly, a new detailed post appeared. She responded calmly and factually to any defense Vince or his hapless office manager tried to mount online, dismantling their arguments with documented evidence. She found other disgruntled clients through online neighborhood groups. There were 3 others just on her street, and encouraged them, coached them on how to document and file formal complaints. A chorus of discontent began to swell. Phase 3, the financial squeeze. Cassidy discovered Vince operated on razor-thin margins, juggling multiple jobs and relying heavily on prompt payments from new clients to pay off suppliers and subcontractors for old ones. So she subtly disrupted his cash flow. How? By becoming his most annoying, time-consuming former client. She requested certified copies of all permits pulled for her job, which revealed discrepancies. She demanded itemized breakdowns of material costs, exposing the particle board versus maple. She filed small claims actions for each individual, provable defect: the cracked tile, $1,500 to replace; the mold remediation, $3,000; the faulty wiring causing appliance damage, $800. Each claim required Vince or his lawyer to show up in court, taking them away from money-making work. She never won big sums, but the cumulative cost in time, legal fees, and court costs was significant. She also, through careful online research and discreet inquiries at local building supply houses, identified Torelli's key suppliers. She sent them copies of her complaints and liens filed, hinting at potential non-payment risks. credit terms subtly tightened. The cracks in Torelli construction started showing almost immediately. The city slapped them with violation notices and stop work orders on 2 new jobs pending inspections. The licensing board opened a formal investigation, freezing their ability to pull new permits in several townships. Online, their rating plummeted. Potential clients cited Cassidy's detailed reviews as reasons for choosing competitors. Vince's smarmy charm evaporated online, replaced by defensive, unprofessional outbursts that only fueled the fire. Suppliers demanded upfront payments. The small claims cases were a constant drain. Cassidy watched it unfold with detached satisfaction. She saw Vince's truck parked outside a local bar more often. He looked harried, the cocky swagger replaced by a defensive hunch. His wife, who occasionally handled the office, started looking perpetually tearful. Leo the nephew got into a shouting match with a supplier on the sidewalk outside their small rented office unit, witnessed and recorded by Cassidy from her car across the street. She felt no pity, only the cold, sharp taste of justice being meticulously served. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, about 4 months after the crack appeared, Cassidy answered her door. Vince stood there, soaked, without his usual leather jacket. He looked 10 years older. The smirk was gone, replaced by a desperate weariness. "Cassidy, please, can we talk?" She didn't invite him in. She stood in her doorway, the scent of fresh paint, applied correctly by her new vetted handyman, mingling with the damp earth smell. "What about, Vince?" He shifted, avoiding her gaze. All this, the complaints, the online stuff, the court and it's killing me. My business, it's falling apart." Cassidy remained silent, her expression impassive. "Look," he pleaded, running a hand through his thinning, wet hair. "I know. Things weren't perfect. Maybe we cut a corner or two." "Maybe?" Cassidy's voice was icy calm. "You lied about materials. You employed incompetent workers. You ignored repeated complaints. You bullied me into paying for a job demonstrably incomplete and defective. Not perfect is a 50 overcharge on a pizza, Vince. This was fraud, negligence, theft of my time, my money, and my peace of mind in my home." He flinched. Okay. It was bad. I screwed up. I was stretched thin, took on too much. But Jesus, Cassidy, you're burying me. You've poisoned everything. No one will hire us. Suppliers won't extend credit. I'm facing fines. I might lose the business. My house is on the line. Cassidy felt a flicker, not of sympathy, but of recognition. She knew the terror of financial ruin, the clawing fear of losing your shelter. She'd felt it during the divorce, but she'd fought her way back honestly. Vince had built his house on sand and lies. "What do you want from me, Vince?" she asked, her voice still level. "Call off the dogs," he begged. "Retract the complaints. Take down the worst reviews. Drop the small claims stuff. Please, I'll fix everything properly, free of charge, I swear. Just give me a chance to make it right." Cassidy studied him. The rain plastered his shirt to his shoulders. He looked broken. This was the moment she'd fantasized about. Him humbled, begging. The sweet taste of victory was sharp on her tongue. But beneath it, unexpected and unwelcome, was a hollow echo. Was this who she'd become? The architect of ruin? She thought of the sleepless nights, the spreadsheets, the obsessive checking of review sites, the energy poured into orchestrating his downfall. It had consumed her almost as much as the renovation disaster itself. She took a slow breath. "Free of charge isn't enough, Vince. You caused quantifiable damage. You violated contract law. You endangered my home with shoddy work." His shoulders slumped further. "What then?" "Here's what happens," Cassidy said, her voice regaining its steel. You sign a legally binding agreement, drafted by my lawyer. You admit fault for the specific defects documented in the independent inspector's report and my complaint files. You agree to have all remedial work completed within 60 days using materials I approve by licensed, bonded tradespeople I vet. You cover all costs, materials, labor, permits, and the cost of my temporary accommodation if needed. Furthermore, you pay me a settlement of $20,000 for breach of contract, consequential damages, and emotional distress. Vince's face went white. 20 grand? I don't have that. The business. Sell the truck. Mortgage the house. That's your problem, Cassidy said coldly. Those are my terms, non-negotiable. Sign the agreement, fulfill it to the letter, and only then will I consider retracting the formal complaints with the licensing board and the city, after their final inspection passes. I will not remove the online reviews. They stay as a matter of public record. Consider them. My Yelp review in perpetuity. And I will drop the small claims actions only after the settlement clears my bank and the work is signed off. He stared at her, a mixture of horror and disbelief. You're crucifying me. No, Vince, Cassidy said, a chilling finality in her voice. I'm presenting you with an invoice for the crack in my floor, for the mold in my walls, for the sleepless nights and the broken trust. Consider it the final payment for services rendered, poorly rendered. She held his gaze. You have 48 hours to have your lawyer contact mine with your agreement. After that, the full force of every agency and claim proceeds. Goodbye, Vince. She closed the door softly but firmly, the solid click echoing in the hallway. Leaning back against the cool wood, she closed her eyes. Her heart hammered against her ribs, not with anger now, but with a strange vibrating tension. The fury was spent, leaving behind a profound exhaustion and an unsettling residue. She had won, utterly. She had dismantled him piece by piece, administratively, legally, financially. The sweet tang of vengeance was undeniable. She had protected her sanctuary and made him pay, literally and figuratively. But as she walked back into her living room, her eyes fell on the perfectly patched ceiling, the gleaming and finally silent kitchen appliances, the solid feel of her new, properly installed front door. She had fought for this, fought dirty perhaps. The meticulous revenge had worked, but the process had etched its own lines on her soul. She hadn't just broken Vince Torelli. She had forged a colder, harder version of Cassidy Brooks in the fire of her own rage. She walked to the window, watching Vince's truck pull away, windshield wipers slapping futilely at the rain. He was diminished, a broken man facing ruin. The crack in her marble floor would be replaced, the mold eradicated. The settlement would replenish her drained accounts. But the crack in her own carefully reconstructed sense of righteousness? That felt deeper, more complex. The revenge was sweet, yes, devastatingly so. But its aftertaste was unexpectedly bitter, a stark reminder of the corrosive cost of meeting betrayal with its own mirrored, meticulously planned intensity. She had her sanctuary back, immaculate and secure. Yet standing in the perfect quiet of her reclaimed home, Cassidy Brooks wondered if the price of its perfection had been a sliver of the woman she thought she was rebuilding. The victory was complete, but the silence it left behind was filled with an echo that wasn't quite triumph. It was the unsettling sound of scales balanced, perhaps too precisely, leaving her standing alone in the quiet aftermath, holding the invoice for her own soul.